Muto, massive unidentified terrestrial organism. It is, however, no longer terrestrial, it is airborne. Now, the world still thinks this was an earthquake, and it would be preferable that that remain so. Before we lost sight of it, it was headed east across the Pacific and had emitted enough EMP disruption to create havoc with our radar and satellite feeds and reduce us, for the moment, to a strictly visual pursuit. I emphasize for the moment, because we will get on our game and we will find this thing. It is imperative that we do so.
And that was a clip, obviously, from the much-anticipated reboot of Godzilla. I'm delighted to be joined by its director, Gareth Edwards. Gareth, hello.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing very well. Now, there was a time, and it was 2010 to be precise, that you would come into the studio to talk about your new movie, which was Monsters, and you just join in the fun. Now, you're a big-shot director, and you're in a luxurious suite somewhere in a hotel, and it seems like an interesting intervening period that you've had, Gareth.
I know I've changed, haven't I?
See, I suspect you haven't changed at all, but I listened back to the Monsters interview that you came in on the show to talk about, and you said what you were working on next was, and I quote, a science fiction film set in a futuristic world without humanity.
Yeah.
What happened to that then?
Godzilla came along.
Fair enough. That is the perfect answer. You know what? I can leave my epic human story in a futuristic world.
That can wait.
Yeah. So fill in the blanks then, Gareth, because Monsters made such an impact on everybody who saw it. And it was great when you came in, and we talked about how you'd made a jump from being a BBC visual effects guy, making Attila the Hun, and what a leap that was to making Monsters. But in comparison, the leap from Monsters to Godzilla seems like nothing at all. So just fill in the intervening period for us.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like when you make a low-budget film that someone, I got lucky and it blips on the radar of Hollywood, and so I ended up going over there, and in 2 weeks I met like 100 people. I did like 1 million meetings.
Wow.
And one of the best meetings I had was with Legendary, who produced Godzilla. And so this really great meeting happened, and I thought to myself, I actually took a picture when I left the studio. I took a picture of their building to sort of to remember it by. And I thought, we're going to end up doing a film together. This is great. And then 3 or 4 months went by, and I never heard from them. And I thought, I got that wrong. And then the phone rang one day, and it was the producer of the movie, and he had some really strange conversation with me, and I was like, why is he calling me? And then right at the end he said, oh, by the way, if we had a really big franchise that was right up your street, would you be interested in doing it? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it depends what it is, but never say never. And then I got a phone call the next day saying that from my agent saying basically they've called and they want to know if you'd be interested in directing Godzilla.
What was the tone of voice that your agent had at this time?
He actually was giddy. He was giggling like a school kid.
Of course he was.
And he was like, are you sitting down? And I said, no. And he's like, sit down. And then he told me, and I swore. And then I was silent. And then they got really nervous that I didn't want to do it. And they were like, do you like Godzilla? And I was like, yeah. No, and I actually just 2 weeks earlier, I'd bought, the BFI had re-released the original 1954 black and white, very serious Godzilla movie that was first made. And I had it still out on my desk, and I was like, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And then the big concern was, I did this very low budget film. You hear all the horror stories about you go to Hollywood and then they sort of rip you to pieces and you don't really get to make the movie you want to make. And so I was very nervous about that. But it was very clear that, especially with Warner Brothers and Legendary, who are responsible for things like, Dark Knight and Inception and those sort of movies, that if you're going to do that kind of leap, they felt like the people to do it with.
And I suspect that's just like a fragment of the intervening 4 years. So let's just talk about what you've done then and how you set up, because that serious movie that you're talking about from 1954, you really wanted the spirit of that to be running through your story, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, they've heard of Godzilla. They recognize, I think he's probably like, if you went around the world with images of cinema icons, and every time someone didn't recognize one, you had to throw it away. I feel like the grand final would be between Mickey Mouse and Godzilla. It's
Hey,
like
there's the follow-up.
it is. It's a very short movie, I'm afraid. But yeah, and so it's this great icon that everybody knows, but a lot of people haven't seen a film, or they've seen like not a serious adult take on it, and it's a surprise when you watch the first one, the very first one that ever existed. It was really, at the time, there was a lot of censorship after World War II, and the Japanese couldn't make any movies about what they'd gone through. And I think, they wanted to make a film about Hiroshima and the nuclear bombs being dropped on them, and so they disguised it as a monster movie, where this because of nuclear testing, this creature comes, destroys the city, and leaves radiation everywhere. And so it was born out of a very serious, poignant concept, and we kind of wanted to go back and take it seriously and find like the modern metaphor for Godzilla.
So how do you begin to do... I mean, maybe you don't want to do something new with Godzilla. Do you base your design on what's gone before? Do you try and forget what's gone before? I see there's been some criticism that he's too portly, but anyway, so which seems hilarious. But anyway, just explain how you go about creating a new lizard for 2014.
Yeah, I get worried about those comments because I know that Godzilla reads all the forums, and he has a very much like an image complex as it is.
And he doesn't take criticism. Well.
No, he smashes up the cities of people who write things like that, and I think the Japanese just want, they sort of miss him and want him to come back and attack them. But it was like, I say to the designers that it's you got to imagine. Let's imagine this is a real animal that really exists. And what happened was 60 years ago when he appeared off the coast of Japan, and people witnessed him, but they couldn't take photographs, and they went running and screaming and to the studios back there and described him, and they went and made all those guy in a suit movies we grew up with. And for the first time in our movie, you're going to see that real animal that they witnessed. And so the idea is that you can understand how they arrived at the classic design, but it also gives us a bit of license to modernize and update him and make him a bit more realistic.
And there are new monsters. Just, I think that cat is out of the bag, if I use an inappropriate metaphor. But tell us about the Mutos and where they fit in with the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think you only get one buy-in, like one crazy get-out-of-jail card with the audience when you make a film. And ours was that we have a 350-foot lizard. And so, but we wanted Godzilla to be confronting something else. We wanted him to be fighting another thing, like in all the other classic movies. And so, but it was important, I think, to try and find something where these other creatures were part of his life cycle, like that they were very much related to his evolution. And I don't want to ruin it for people, but they're kind of natural foes in terms of the way he's existed. And in our movie, Godzilla really is kind of like he's a dinosaur basically that survived the extinction event, or his species did, and now he's pretty much the last of his kind that's dying out. That's spends all his time living below the ocean, and because of the things that we're doing to the planet, because of our abuse of nature, whatever you want to call it, we create, or we bring back this animal that causes Godzilla to have to come back to confront.
And how much, if at all, did the events at Fukushima in 2011 inform or affect the final film?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a great tradition, if not, it was part of, Godzilla, that we were always going to set this film in Japan to some extent, at least the first half of the movie, and that he represents, the fear of the use of nuclear power. And we were writing the screenplay when the events in Japan took place, when Fukushima happened. And we had a big choice to make. It was like, do we not set the film in Japan? Do we not make it about nuclear power? And we spoke to like Toho, which is the Japanese studio that made all the other Godzilla movies. We spoke to them, and we spoke to all our Japanese partners on the film, and we're like, what should we do? And they said, well, as long as you do it respectfully, it's kind of like the job of a movie like this to raise questions in popular culture, as well as it being entertainment, to kind of like, bring up some of these issues. And so the film's very much about that, as humans, we're always trying to control nature, abuse it for our own benefit. And the reality is every time we do this, inevitably something goes wrong and makes life, even worse for ourselves. And so it's really about the fact that we don't control nature. Nature controls us, and we have to accept that. And I think the movie's got those themes within it, I hope.
I loved the film very much, and in fact, I'm planning to go and see it again. But
thank you.
The thing that I just want to mention, which comes up periodically, I love the sound of this film. And you should not wait for this to be streamed on your television. You shouldn't watch it on a DVD. But I think you should go to find the best cinema with the greatest sound system you possibly can.
Yeah.
Because the noises that come out at various stages, whether they be water noises, but not really the explosions, but just the groaning sense of fear and terror which you manage to put throughout the movie, are just wonderful. That's not a question. That's kind of a statement. But
no,
how do you build that?
I'd love to take credit for it, but it was really Eric Dahl, who was the sound designer. I think he's a bit of a genius. He does films like he did Transformers, so he did that End of the Spectrum, and he did like Tree of Life for Terrence Malick. So he's got this like really broad range of ability. And what he did is if you look at the original 1954 or the classic Godzilla roar that's used in every single Godzilla movie, what they did is they had a double bass and they scraped the strings with a leather glove, and it did that sort of noise.
Right.
And we bought a double bass and a leather glove, and we tried to recreate it, and we couldn't. And so what they did is they got hold of these scientific microphones. There's this new technology that records things in really high fidelity. It's a bit like a camera that records in slow motion. So like really obscure sounds like, the squeak of a chair, like sort of going, ee, as when you slow it down, it sort of goes, and you get all these unique little audio events. They basically went around recording all these different sounds, all like crazy little things. And when they were slowed down, they became like these epic screams. And so it was this new technology that really allowed us to create all the creature sounds in the movie.
Well, which I think is a stunning success. I imagine one of the reasons, Gareth, you might have been given the gig in the first place is because when all the team behind Godzilla looked at monsters, they saw a story with real characters. Sure, there were monsters, and as we discussed at the time, for a lot of people there weren't enough monsters. They were kind of there, but there was a big story happening, and there were real characters. And I imagine that you absolutely wanted to bring that into, because obviously it can get taken over by the monsters, but we have a real story here.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's the sort of thing like. I think the thing that people don't associate with Godzilla necessarily is, we wanted to inject some heart and soul into it, and you use a lot of words when you're trying to make a film, and epic came up a lot, but the other word that came up the most was emotional, and we were trying to find a way of creating, as much an emotional journey. Like to me, when you lay out a film and you're trying to figure out what the audience is going to feel at various points, like I was definitely looking in this, like where are they going to tear up, or where are they going to be moved, and I think it's because growing up I grew up in the 80s with those early Spielberg and Ridley Scott and James Cameron kind of movies, and it was before the advent of digital technology, and because they couldn't show stuff all the time, it creates much more sense of anticipation, and you really you get to know the characters and fall in love with them. So when you finally get the spectacle and the fantasy, it's a lot more powerful. It has a lot more effects, and so we wanted to harken back to that type of filmmaking as much as possible. And obviously, you see the spectacle, you see Godzilla, but we really build to it and try and create that anticipation, and so that when you finally get the big reveal and you get the creature fight type thing, it has the maximum impact.
We have Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, and Bryan Cranston. Were you, who's like at the heart of this story? Were you a Breaking Bad fan? Are you a Breaking Bad fan?
I have to confess that I only saw a handful of episodes, and I was really actually the thing that got me into Brian was Malcolm in the Middle.
Okay,
it's a really strange thing to say, but he I think he's such a funny guy. He's the funniest guy I've ever met. He's such a great comedian as well, and I think it's sometimes like it's harder to do comedy acting than it is to do dramatic acting, like to get all that timing right and all those little nuances. And in that show, he was so impressive that I always felt like, if someone just gave him a dramatic role, like a really serious dramatic role, he'd knock it out of the park. And obviously, I got beat to it with Breaking Bad. But thankfully, he agreed to do it, and we sent him the screenplay. And everyone's initial reaction when you say, "Do you want to do Godzilla?" They all go, "I'm not sure." I don't think it's the right thing for me. And we'd always say, "Yeah, we know. We're not making the movie you're picturing. We're trying to do something that's got emotion and takes itself seriously, and and you know, thank God they all sort of did a U-turn.
And just finally, Gareth, is this? I know everyone's asking, but is this a? You mentioned the word franchise at the beginning of our conversation. Is that what this is? Is this the start of a franchise? You're going to be back for more?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to, but I think, you know, we made it as a standalone film. You don't have to have seen a previous one, and we're not expecting anything afterwards. It's its own little movie, and it's just up to the audience. Like if people like it, if there's a demand, you know, I'd be first in line to be asking to direct another one. But we'll see what happens.
Gareth Edwards, we appreciate your time. Thank you. And I can't think what kind of stellar jump you can make in the next 4 years to compare with the last one. But thanks very much for coming on again, sir.
No, thank you so much. Thanks a lot.